So welcome to Active Left TV. My name is Jamie Newlyn, and today I'm joined by two fantastic First Nations leaders to discuss reconciliation, constitutional recognition, and how the recent Black Lives Matter movement can rally all Australians to lend their support to First Nations struggles to prevent deaths in custody, bridging the gap, and ultimately a voice to Parliament as envisaged by the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Shona Reid is the Executive Officer of Reconciliation SA. Shona is a proud Eastern Arentara woman with family legacy that extends into the Heart Ranges in the Northern Territory. With the separation of her family from their country many years ago, Shona has lived and worked across South Australia for most of her life and regards South Australia as home. Shona is married to Lyndon Reid, a Wankaguru man, has 4 children, is blessed to share in the life of Lyndon's 3 other children. In addition, Shona currently holds positions on the SA Youth Centre Review Board and the South Australian Housing Trust Board of Management. And we're also joined by Thomas Mayer. He's a Torres Strait Islander, or Zendath Kes man, who was born and lives on Larrakia land in Darwin with his family. Thomas is the elected Deputy Branch Secretary of the Northern Territory branch of the Maritime Union of Australia and the President of the Northern Territory Trades and Labour Council. Thomas was elected from the First Nations Darwin Dialogue on Constitutional Reform to participate in the Uluru Convention that delivered the Uluru Statement from the Heart. He is now an acclaimed author, having written Finding the Heart of the Nation, a story of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and a second book for young Australians, Finding Our Heart. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're recording this meeting today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the land and waters of the Adelaide Plains and their continuing cultural, spiritual, physical and emotional connection to this land, its waters and community. I'd like to pay my respects to our Kaurna elders past, present and emerging. The land I'm sitting on was never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome to the both here. I'll start with Shona. Shona, given the powerful demonstrations we've seen across the country around the Black Lives Matter movement, could you tell us how reconciliations work has changed over the years, and what do you think is the most powerful thing that we could do to support those activities?
Thanks, Jamie. Absolutely, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Kaurna land, but also to acknowledge my ancestors and Thomas, you too, and the beautiful country you got sitting behind you, which is much better than my bedroom. So reconciliation movement has, you know, I suppose focused previously in the government space. They've looked at how they can manipulate government systems and tried to influence that way. I think one of the problems with that is that you're, you know, you're dragging your feet and we don't actually get a movement behind us, and we call ourselves a reconciliation movement for a reason. You know, one of the things I've seen from the Black Lives Matter movement and I've seen from absolutely before that, so recognising the amazing work of activists and advocacy units that have happened right from, you know, 1800s, that's been happening, 1900s. We're talking about the, you know, changes to the constitutions. We're talking about, you know, the up north when they were doing the agreements and trying to, you know, negotiate with governments and treaties, you know, the Yolngu people up north. You know, right across this country, there have been many people that have made many efforts to provide opportunities for First Nations people to sit rightfully where we are on unceded country and unceded land. And I think the reconciliation movement has responded in some ways to that, and it was quite a political response to start with. Let's be fair, it was out of failed negotiations or failed commitments, I suppose, you know, from some of those agreements that were negotiated up north. But what's happened, I think, in recent times is that it's actually it's become a community movement. It's become one where we've had not just government systems, they're not taking the lead anymore in reconciliation. I think who's taking the lead in reconciliation are community. I think who's taking the lead in reconciliation are organisations that understand the value of First Nations participation in all aspects of their business, not just on the you know, not just in terms of land management and you know, mining or those sorts of things, but the true appreciation of First Nations participation in all aspects, the business integrity, as well as the cultural integrity of organisations. So I think the movement has changed quite significantly. And I think the reason that it's changed is because there has been some real practical opportunities and applications of, you know, methods that enable people to meaningfully engage in the movement. So, you know, in this space, I refer to, you know, the upsurge of reconciliation action plans that sit within organisations and how they've engaged in that. And it is a tool that is used, and it is not, you know, it's not the answer to anything, but it is a process that people can participate in, and it makes people engage. It forces organisations to enter into opportunities that they never would have thought of before. So it is a great template for agencies and organisations, and I'm talking from everything from kindergartens through to, you know, government departments, but through to not-for-profit organisations, for-profit organisations, corporations, mum and dad businesses. They all participate in that program. And as a collective, they all do, or as individuals, they all do their little bit, but as a collective, they make a huge impact on the way that, you know, their organisations, their business, their attitudes around First Nations participation in Australia and South Australia's community meaningfully, and not something that's seen as, you know, something that's they have obligated to do. It's something that there is a lot of energy around, and people are constantly looking for ways to, you know, improve their business, but also improve their relationship with the community here in South Australia. I get phone calls on a daily basis, so talking about, you know, what can I do? What can I do to be more respectful? What can I do to make sure that this is not just another piece of paper sitting on a bookshelf? What can I do to, you know, increase people's participation in my activities, you know, in terms of their businesses' activities, but also how can they contribute back to South Australian community, because they have benefited so greatly from, you know, the life that they live here in Australia and in South Australia, and they want to give back. So I'm really excited about that component of it. What I think we have now, not just, I think, you know, I think this, a big conversation has started and more enthusiasm has happened and accelerated, and I have seen that happen in the last few years, is with the Uluru Statement from the Heart. That is a absolute pivotal, very clear and very gracious piece of work that has provided not only this whole, you know, a political roadmap for around how do we, you know, take on board what First Nations people across the country are asking for. But I think what it's actually saying, and I think you can break it down to, Thomas I'm sure will go into it, but when I talk to community and when I talk to organisations and businesses, they ask about how is it relevant to me, because they think in some aspects that it's, you know, some big, you know, unreachable document that relates to just Parliament and just federal activities. But I talk through them around what is it actually saying to them, and, you know, that they don't have to think on a political federal level. You can actually think about this in every part of your business and every interaction that you have as an individual. And those things are about, you know, the voice treaty truth. It is around how are you in your everyday life and your organisation's life enabling First Nations voice to be heard in your space. Are you overpowering that voice? Are you listening to that voice? Are you prepared to sit and take in what that voice is saying? The next is around, you know, what's the truth of the conversation? What's the truth of your relationship with your community? What's the truth of your relationship, you know, historically, but also currently about your relationship with community? Are you aware of that? And are you embracing that? Are you acknowledging that? And the next bit was around, you know, the treaty, the agreement making, and do you have those relationships with community? Have you developed protocols? Have you developed a shared understanding about how you want to interact with First Nations community and your organisation? And you can break that down. It doesn't have to be some pie in the sky, you know, thing that, you know, you can't attach yourself to. You can absolutely attach yourself to the Uluru Statement. And I think that is where I think we should invest ourselves. That is what the voice of the community was. That is the most considered piece of work. Now, I've worked in Parliament. I've run committees in Parliament. I work with politicians on a daily basis. You know, I've seen processes undertaken in there to get consensus. The Uluru Statement from the Heart went above and beyond with regards to its consultative processes and gathering collective views of community. And anyone that wants to debate that, I'm happy to go to back for anyone that talks about, you know, how consultative. It went above and beyond what would normally be required for a consultative process in a democratic society. It is what has been provided to us, and I absolutely think we should be gracious as a community, Australian community, to sit and listen to that and to take the guidance of First Nations people and not overpower that voice with the dominant culture's voice, because our dominant culture's job is to sit there and listen to it and take guidance. And I think that's exactly what the statements ask for, and I think that's exactly what we should be doing. I think I've gone over my time, Jamie.
That's fine. That's great, Shona, and I really appreciate that. You've given us a lot to think about and take on board, and it's, you know, it creates a profoundly moving discussion. And of course, you know, we want First Nations people to lead this process, and we're trying to work out ways to convince people, or not convince, but how we stand beside you and not take that leadership on board and leave that to First Nations people. Joined by Thomas. Thomas, you attended the conference that delivered the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We'd like to hear how the statement came to be, about its journey across the country and how it was received, and how you think we might become allies in the struggle for achieving First Nations voice in the Australian Parliament, and what does that actually involve? And maybe firstly, tell us where you're joining us from today.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Thanks, comrade. I'm coming to you from Larrakia country, just out bush at Mandora, actually, Wagite Beach, Bellewen way. So I pay my respects to the Larrakia people, their elders past and present. I'm actually out here with the Rangers, so I've come to find a bit of reception by the beach here with a big bunch of kids. And yeah, so I'm coming to you from a special place. So I just, Shona's wrap up of the powerful aspect of the Uluru Statement, I'll begin with that. And just summarising again that this great opportunity that the Uluru Statement gives is that there is a tangible set of reforms that followed a very comprehensive, well-informed, and with the cultural authority of each of the 13 regions, came from that process and gives us an opportunity to really pursue something. And I think just back on Shona's talk again as well, how the reconciliation movement is so important to this. And some people say that, you know, that it hasn't been as powerful as it should be, but that's because it needs this, you know, something to really, something solid, something tangible, as I said, that can be pursued. And the great work of Reconciliation Networks and Reconciliation South Australia is that now we have a ready-made movement to really kick things along. And so, you know, that's been fantastic work that's been done. And the reconciliation action plans, again, same thing, you know, now there is something really tangible, not just the fluffy, you know, kumbaya type stuff, but okay, here is a political aspiration that comes from a collective of First Nations people, and now we can go and pursue it. So with that, I'll just go back to the, as the question was, you know, the where it came from. And it came from struggle. You know, it comes from more than 200 years of struggle, of different moments where our people have come together in different ways and made claims consistently about voice, agreement making or treaty and truth telling consistently. So if we go back to the Yirrkala Bark petitions, if we go back even further to the Day of Mourning, the Barunga Statement, the Larrakia petition to the Queen, there has been a consistent pursuance of voice, treaty, truth. And so the Uluru Statement is just another reiteration, is a reiteration of that, but in a much more powerful way. Because constitutional recognition was talked about in this country for around a decade before this moment. It had never had a process of dialogues around the country led and designed by Indigenous experts like the Uluru process was. And there was a pushback that led to that happening. So the Kirribilli statement, I encourage comrades to have a look at the Kirribilli statement, where it clearly said to the Prime Minister and the opposition leader in 2015, which was Tony Abbott and Bill Shorten, we do not accept symbolic constitutional recognition. We want substantive reform, substantive constitutional reform. And secondly, among other things, and importantly, that we want the resources to go and ask our people. And so that's where the process began, really. You know, that long history of our struggle, the Kirribilli statement, and then the dialogues. 13 dialogues around the country. I attended the Darwin one as a participant, and was elected from that that dialogue to go to Uluru. And so Uluru, the convention was around 270 people elected out of those regional dialogues that then considered the synthesis of all of those dialogues. So the accurate records of meetings were compiled, were presented by each of the dialogue representatives, and then synthesised into the Uluru statement after 3 days of discussions and debates about how that should be done. And it's worth noting, always worth noting, that around 7 of the delegates walked out of the convention on the second of 3 days, but that's okay, right? We know, especially us as leftists, you know, as unionists, that factions always form, and that often those that cannot convince the majority will try and leverage their position in other ways to try and move the rest of us. But a great majority of us weren't moved by their position, which was that that, you know, the Constitution, one of them got up and said, we've got expert advice from a barrister, you know, that says if we can get $300,000 together, we can see that the Constitution is thrown out in an international court, you know. So the rest of the convention was not convinced by that, you know, because that's been talked about for a long time as well. And, you know, I'm sure if a barrister had that much expertise and, you know, could do that, he would have done it, and it would be quite famous by now, because, you know, Australia would be no more. But you get the point. So they walked out, they did their thing, but the rest of us remained, and we endorsed the Uluru Statement the next day, which was a really powerful moment for this movement, you know, the movement for Indigenous rights, and for this country, you know, a constitutional moment, providing the opportunity for all of us to change the Constitution, to fundamentally change the institutions in a way that will see our people no longer harmed by decisions that are made without us. And so this is a great opportunity we have. The Uluru Statement is an invitation to the Australian people, comrade, and I note you said that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people should always lead on this, and I'll end with this. We have led on this. We now have the Uluru Statement from the heart. It's a mandate, it's an invitation, and there is no longer any need to wait on that particular matter. Don't wait for Indigenous people to tell you what to do on this. Come up with any way possible that you can think of, use your initiative, any way that you can to spread the word of the Uluru Statement. Because we have had research done recently that indicates that 50% of the Australian people would vote yes, and that is without a proper, well-resourced campaign. So those are good numbers. But it also correlates with 50% of the Australian people knowing what the Uluru Statement is. And so that what that tells us is, it is a powerful action for you to do right now, to spread the word of the Uluru Statement in your workplaces, in your unions, in your sporting clubs, wherever you can. Encourage people to read it and learn about it, and that builds our movement. That research was done some months ago. We've had a resurgence of our campaign since the anniversary in May, and we've seen that it's gone 7 points up. Those initial numbers that I said, 7 points towards people saying yes, just with that resurgence. So we can see that we can win this, and we need to put the pressure on the government to put it to the people so that we can answer the question that was asked in the Uluru Statement. Thanks.
Well done, Thomas. Thank you very much. And I'll just clarify that when I said that First Nations lead, Obviously, you've led in the delivery of the Uluru statement, and we stand beside you to promote that activity. And I was emphasising that we shouldn't be white tokenistic, being led from Parliament, decisions that don't involve First Nations people. So I just want to clarify that. I really
Thanks,
want to thank you for your wisdom and your leadership in this space. And of course, Shona, thank you very much. We've given you an open invitation to attend one of our meetings to further expand on this work and activity, and to give us an opportunity to, and the tools, I guess, to go out and spread the word and ensure that we get a voice to Parliament, and that reconciliation, Makarrata, and all those important things are enlivened and given voice. So I want to thank you both very much for your time. Thomas, in particular, moving away from your family. Thanks very much. Solidarity to all, and to the First Nations people. Thanks very much.
Thank you, comrade. Thanks, Shona.